What's up, guys? This is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week is a little bit different. First, I'm going to start off by reading an article I wrote last year for our blog called Know Your Why, How I Went from Heroin Addiction to Winning the CrossFit Games. After that, I'm going to share with you some thoughts on an emergency encounter I had a couple weeks ago with one of my buddies. Before that, I have a couple things. If you're listening to this, please go and leave us a review on iTunes or go to brutestrengthtraining.com/podcast/reviews. Next, if you haven't already, go ahead and sign up for our newsletter. That's where we're going to keep you up to date on podcast or educational videos that we're putting out, as well as any new programs or products that we put out as well. And without further ado, Know Your Why. Published April 14th, 2015. I sat in a cheap motel room in Salt Lake City with my friend Dan. It was June of 2009. I'd been up for a few days smoking crack and shooting heroin. I had isolated myself from my friends and family, and I had abandoned the support system I had used in recovery. I had lied to my therapist, my AA sponsor, everyone. In spite of my best efforts, I had once again let myself slip into a dangerously depressive state. The shame was a sharp edge, cutting unbearably deeper every day. I figured if I did enough drugs, I could forget about it momentarily, or at least dull the pain. Fast forward 2 years later, and I'm standing on top of the CrossFit Games podium with my teammates from Ute. I was happy and free of any desire to use drugs anymore. How did I make such a dramatic turnaround? Through purpose. Not the kind you lose and rediscover, but the kind you invent. Since my relapse nearly 6 years ago, I've experienced emotional highs and lows like anybody else, but I've never returned to that same level of depression and self-loathing. I'm not writing this article to tell you how I stopped hating myself. Rather, I'm writing to tell you how, through a mindful practice of compassion and gratitude, I overcame my addiction, reclaimed my life, and achieved a level of happiness I had never thought possible. Salt Lake City, 2009. 2008 and 2009 were busy years for me. On top of finishing 12 months of inpatient rehab, I also ran the Salt Lake City Marathon, winning my age division, and got nearly straight A's in the honors program in my first semester of college. I had exceeded every marker of what I considered success, yet I had never been more miserable. After leaving inpatient treatment, I was convinced I knew exactly what I needed to do in order to stay clean. Work hard, be honest, and help others. I still live with these basic principles in mind, and while they briefly kept me on track after rehab, I didn't then, as I do now, have a clear understanding as to why, other than the fact that these principles helped align my actions to be more consistent with them. But soon after my moral instrumentation began to fail me, and with no tangible purpose guiding my purported principles, I gradually began to veer off course, focusing more on being cool, having sex, and convincing everyone around me of my own self-importance. Any sense of humility all but disappeared. My brain was in turmoil, wrangling with my blatant hypocrisy. I was regularly doing things that didn't align with my core principles, and the depression and anxiety that had fueled my drug addiction returned. Rather than fight to find my way back to the clean path I had set, I wandered back into darkness to drug use and relapse, eventually hiding away in a cheap motel, desperately trying to numb myself against the realities of the outside world. I had a long road to walk after I got clean. My relapse administered a much-needed dose of humility, which I credit with saving my life. Practicing that humility through rigorous honesty and service to others became a huge part of my life. In fact, it became the most important thing in my life. From mentoring other people in recovery to housing recovering addicts, sometimes for months on end, I was dedicated to doing whatever it took to stay free of my addiction. In Daniel Pink's book, Drive, the author cites a sense of purpose as one of the three most important aspects of human motivation. I felt like my purpose in life was to help others. My service filled me with gratitude and a newfound sense of fulfillment. Service became my why, my purpose, around which everything in my life revolved. I began studying psychology with the goal of becoming a social worker. I believed falsely that every action I took was completely selfless. Truthfully, I was then and am now a more selfish person than I aspired to be. But after my relapse, I was more aware of my mistakes and willing to hold myself accountable for them. My sense of purpose had repaired my moral instrumentation, but I wasn't completely certain about my direction. I was still missing a key ingredient, the pursuit of mastery, necessary to motivate the profound changes I wanted to make in my life. Until I found CrossFit, the only thing I had really been passionate about since getting sober was not losing, which is entirely different than winning. The fact that when I started CrossFit, I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, had lost a ton of strength during rehab and marathon training, and was consequently finishing last in daily workouts, was enough motivation for me to stick around. Service was my purpose, and CrossFit reignited my passion and desire for mastery, but I didn't know how to tie those things together until I started coaching. As much as I had learned about the workings of the mind as a psychology major, I knew very little about the mechanics of the body, in spite of the fact that I had played 5 sports in high school. Through CrossFit, I became enthralled by the capabilities of the human body. After realizing I lacked the emotional fortitude to be a social worker, I spent the next couple years contemplating going to medical or physical therapy school. Those seemed like the safest routes to take. My plans were still congruent with my why, my stated purpose of a life spent in service to others, but my actions, same as before, started to run counter to that purpose. I didn't relapse, but my focus once again turned inward. My desire to serve others devolved to a desire to serve myself, and a competitive CrossFit became the all-consuming focus in my life. I wasn't miserable during this time. I wasn't even particularly unhappy per se, but my competitive success didn't bring me the same sense of fulfillment I had felt years prior when I was first drawn to social work. If my dad has taught me anything other than how to get a rise out of someone, it's the importance of creating balance in life. As an addict, that's a tough line to walk because most everything in life has been firmly black or white, everything or nothing at all. I reintroduced meditation into my life and put more emphasis on my relationships with my friends and family. Learning to live a life driven by purpose doesn't happen all at once. Sure, I've had some revelatory moments in my life, but where I am today is largely the sum of the smaller conscious decisions I've made. Salt Lake City, 2012. After college, the plan was to apply for physical therapy school. It seemed like something that would fulfill me. However, the end goal of being a physical therapist didn't really excite me. It didn't seem like the full package I was looking for. Around that time, I was offered a job at Southern Utah University as a strength and conditioning coach. I had honestly never even considered it, but when it was mentioned, I was immediately interested. Being a strength and conditioning coach had the excitement factor I was looking for. I saw it as a way to get paid to do something both exciting and fascinating to me. I took the job and entered a master's program in sports performance and conditioning. The practical experience alone was priceless. I had the opportunity to work with several D1 programs, some of which I was entirely in charge of in terms of strength and conditioning. The best thing that happened to me at SUU was meeting the assistant strength and conditioning coach, Jake Hutton. He was and still is the best sports performance expert I've met. He instantly became a mentor to me. My narrow view of strength and conditioning rapidly expanded. It went from a passion to nearly an obsession. I spent hours on end reading books and scouring through articles online, and I think I subscribed to about 10 different sports performance websites within a month. The choices I make, good and bad, reflect a choice to behave either in accordance with or contrary to my purpose. When I act contrary to my purpose, it's more often than not reflective of a desire to immediately satisfy some need. I've had to repeatedly learn to resist what I want now to get what I want most. The desire for instant gratification is powerful at times, overwhelming at others. In 2012, I attended a SEAL Fit Kokoro camp with my Hacks Pack teammates and was confronted with a choice: endure the pain in my back and feet for the sake of my teammates who were hurting just as much as I, or quit and put an immediate end to my physical discomfort. Regrettably, I chose the latter and committed one of the most egregious offenses against my why to date. It was the worst I had felt since my relapse. I was embarrassed and my ego was bruised, but more than that, I had violated a family credo: no quitting. No matter how tough, no matter how much you may not want to, provided there's no risk of serious long-term injury, there's no excuse for quitting. So I signed up for another Kokoro camp and completed it a week after the 2013 CrossFit Games. The day after Kokoro, I began the opportunity of a lifetime, which is to work with the LSU strength and conditioning staff under the renowned coach Tommy Moffitt. The practical experience alone of working with world-class athletes was priceless. I also gained an enormous amount of valuable knowledge on everything from speed and agility to hypertrophy methods to mental toughness, etc. At the end of 2013, I underwent a long-needed lumbar fusion surgery. I was born with a condition called spondylolisthesis, and football, powerlifting, and CrossFit compounded with that pre-existing condition to produce neurological damage. To say that I was humbled would be an understatement. I had never felt physically incapable in my entire life. Sure, Kokoro was painful, but in a very different mindset, I would have been fine. After this surgery, I couldn't walk for more than 400 yards for the better part of a month. I was absolutely crushed. However, as always, this challenge ignited another huge positive shift in my mind. I had always identified myself as an athlete and put a disproportionate amount of my self-worth on my athletic success. The recovery period from surgery gave me a lot of time to consider getting back into CrossFit and ultimately to accept the fact that I may never be a competitive athlete again. So I made another move. Working at LSU was extremely exciting, but I wanted more autonomy. Call it cockiness or just human nature. I wanted to create my own thing. I had an offer from my old teammate, Tommy Hack, to buy one of his gyms in Salt Lake City with Jake Hutton. Owning a gym had never appealed to me, but the prospect of working with my good friend and mentor again attracted me. During the past year, I had also been training a number of CrossFit athletes online with another one of my best friends, Matt Bruce. When I decided I was going to move, Matt, Tommy, and I started our new company, Brute Strength, with an entirely new vision. First off, I saw the opportunity to do something entirely different from any other CrossFit training program. I observed that several of the most successful coaches were one-man shows. I wanted to create a team of coaches, like most other professional sports, that would work together for our athletes and clients. Just as with our CrossFit programs, I wanted to create the absolute highest quality training programs for average Joes, whether in or out of CrossFit gyms. To be completely honest, this was the most attractive part about starting this company. It helped me align my sense of purpose with something exciting and fun. When your decision-making is based on your why, your purpose, you naturally gravitate to the people and vocations that are most likely to provide you with long-term happiness. You don't have to know exactly what you want to do. I didn't for the longest time. It's about values. Try different things, but make sure whatever you're doing is in line with those values. Also, remember that you are human and you will make mistakes. It's an inescapable part of the learning process, but those mistakes, as painful as they may be at times, are opportunities to grow. Don't let the pain from failure or fear of failure itself deter you from pursuing what you're most passionate about. In moments of self-doubt, remind yourself why and how will become clearer. I doubt myself every single day. I get scared on camera. I often eat poorly and fail to make my bed. I make selfish decisions. I can be lazy as hell. The thought, I'm a fraud and I'll never amount to anything, constantly try to pull me in. Despite all of these things, I choose to act in a way that aligns with my why. I can do things I'm afraid of every single day. I get shut down and I try again, or I try a different angle. I hope this helps some of you, even just one of you, to find a little hope, inspiration, or just perspective. End quote. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Honestly, I was shitting my pants the entire time reading that, as silly as that may seem. But the reason I wanted to do this in the first place is because it aligns with my why. And I want to inspire people to think this way and to live their lives this way. So I'm going to share one more experience with you that I've had recently that kind of goes along the same lines, and I'll preface it with this. We always say we're going to do these big things in life. I'm going to learn Spanish. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to take a tantric sex class so my significant other can have the most transcendent orgasms in the world. But how many of us actually do these things that we say we will? I know that at 25 years old, I've already had dozens of things that I said I was going to do and didn't follow through with. So about 2 weeks ago, my best friend in the whole world, I found out that he was almost dead. I get a call from my friend Bryce. Says Bryce is in the ICU in Peru. He was supposed to be backpacking. And I'll try to make this as quick as possible, but we find out that he had swine flu, which is one of the most deadly flus known to man, hiked up to 16,000 feet, or he was at 16,000 feet in elevation, and ended up not getting it treated for about a week. And so the flu did a number on him, as well as being that high to the point that when they x-rayed his lungs, it was completely white, and they're supposed to be like gray and like almost dark gray. So if I understand it correctly, his alveoli in his lungs were like almost completely frozen. So he had to be put on a ventilator, and he stayed on that ventilator for about 10 days. He had to make an 8-hour emergency ambulance ride to a bigger hospital in Lima. And me and 3 of his family members have spent the last almost 2 weeks in Lima by his side. And before I go into the rest, he is alive. He's healthy. He's walking again. He got out of the ICU yesterday. But this whole experience has been so powerful for me. It would be motivating enough if it had been any friend, but Bryce is not an ordinary guy. He's an extraordinary human who I attribute a lot of my positive qualities and success to. He does whatever he wants to. He sees a pretty girl, he goes and talks to her. He wants to go and travel to Australia for 3 months, he goes and does it. He's the most loyal friend, most fun-loving, and one of my biggest role models in life. But it is the specific quality that he does what he wants to do that has really inspired me lately. A few weeks ago, he visited a D&I in Santa Cruz. We went bowling one night, and we stopped in to watch some people singing karaoke. Bryce walks over, and she's singing some kind of rap song, and he goes up and starts grinding with her, and she absolutely loves it. And he's in front of 100 people, and he comes back, he's beat red, but she loved it, he loved it, everybody's howling with laughter. The dude just does whatever it is he wants to do in life. So the past couple of weeks, I've had a lot of time to contemplate Bryce dying, and it's made me reflect on the things that matter most in life, because he was extremely healthy, and the fact that this happened to him means that this could happen to any of us at any time, or any one of our loved ones at any time. So the first thing that comes to mind is that we should do the things we love to do more often, and we should spend time with the people that we love more often. I think way too many of us spend too much time working to buy things that we think will make us happy rather than doing the things that we love with the people that we love. So think about the best day of your life, like the perfect day. And when you have time, I encourage all of you to sit and write this down in as much detail as possible. But for the sake of this podcast, I'll just keep going. Mine, briefly, it would be spent with my family, a couple close friends. I'd probably be somewhere in nature, either on a beach or some mountains, and we play all day, relax all night, telling stories, joking, etc. Nowhere in there are any electronics that I've been saving up for, nothing about a car, etc. Those things are really nice, but they're not what bring us happiness. And although a lot of us don't think we spend too much time doing that, I think if we really analyze the amount of time we spend working, thinking about work, watching television, we'll realize that our priorities are not really what we say they are. So I think it's important to be really clear about that. And one of the problems that we have as humans is that we take things for granted. So take, for instance, you save up for a car. You save up for a $20,000 car. You work your butt off for 2 years, you buy the car, you have the car for 6 months, and then you want a new car. You want a $50,000 car. We're like that with everything, with relationships, with goals in sports, etc. It's something that keeps us competitive, which can be a good thing. But when you look at your life as a whole, we have to be able to be grateful for what we have now. That's the only way to be happy in the here and now. So I've been reading this book recently called A Guide to the Good Life, and it talks about something called negative visualization, and it's a way to practice gratitude and prevent ourselves from taking things for granted. So take your spouse or your best friend or a family member, someone that you really love. It's human nature to take that person for granted because we're around them all the time. If we don't want to take them for granted, this negative visualization says that periodically, say every week or so, we should visualize losing that person because it is a very real possibility that we will lose that person unexpectedly. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but it could. So what would your life be like without that person? The goal here is to be grateful for what we have now. So if we know that it's a possibility that we could lose something, then we appreciate it more in the here and now. The other thing that I've been thinking a lot about the past couple weeks is the importance of being vulnerable and working through fear. I think every one of us has things that we want to do in life but are too afraid to do. Some of us are able to deal with that fear and do those things, while others of us are paralyzed. And I don't think we are, either one or the other. I think we have different relationships with different parts of our lives. But the key is to realize that the fear itself is just an emotion. It will always be there. It will never dissipate. It's just a byproduct of doing things worthwhile and meaningful. I think a lot of the most exciting things in our lives are things that we're afraid of. And this has been a really huge piece of my life since my time in recovery, because as an adolescent, I wasn't vulnerable with anyone, so I didn't feel like I had real connection with anyone. And as Brené Brown talks about it in her book, Daring Greatly, that is the key to meaningful, lasting relationship, is this vulnerability. A few of the things, just to explain what being vulnerable is in a variety of settings, I'll tell you a few of mine over the past few years. Going to AA meetings and school when I was fresh out of treatment, when all the people in my transition house, or most of them, were smoking cigarettes, doing drugs, drinking, and skipping class all day. So I wasn't seen as the cool guy at the time, and I was afraid of that. But that's what allowed me to get good grades, stay sober, etc. Another one, when I was around that same time, I had almost clinical anxiety. Well, I did. I was medicated for anxiety for a while, and even the simplest things, such as making friends and asking girls out, were a challenge for me. But this is the time that I really started to figure out who I was, and I developed a real sense of self-confidence by doing these things. Going to take a job at Southern Utah University rather than pursuing a job in physical therapy, which is much more stable. That allowed me to pursue a passion, which I wouldn't have otherwise, which then led to another vulnerability, which was starting a business, and an even less stable job, but one that has given me freedom and autonomy and all these things that I love. Posting on social media things that may not be seen as cool, telling guy friends how much they mean to me. And I say guy friends because that's a little bit harder for those of us that grew up in the South. That's just not something we are brought up to do. But that's one of the things that helps us grow closer to people, expressing how much we care and love for each other. Starting this podcast was a huge one, but it's one that allows me to express myself, develop more confidence, all kinds of good stuff. So all of these things, really scary, but what I continue to realize is that right on the other side of these things that I'm afraid to do are excitement, connection, all these amazing things that I wouldn't get to experience as much if I didn't do them. It never becomes easier to take risks and be vulnerable. That's why it's called a risk. But right on the other side of that fear is everything that you want in life. So get out there, do what you love. All right, rant over. Last thing, if you're interested in looking better naked, having better sex, getting stronger, Brute Body launches on March 21st. So we moved it back so that you guys could start it right after the open. It's a 90-day program built specifically for getting stronger, looking better naked. If you want to be one of the first to know, go ahead and sign up for the newsletter at brutestrengthtraining.com, and there will be discounts sent out to the newsletter. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed the show.